Your name is František Zmek. It's July 1966, you are blasting Karel Gott, and you are generally in a good mood. You are determined to dig up and repair some water pipes on your plot. It's not long after that instead of pipes, you encounter human bones. Or are those even human bones? In Čelákovice, in the year 1966, a vampire graveyard was found. 11 graves in total, and all of them had the signs of a vampire burial. Open jaw, severed heads, tied arms and legs. Finding a site like this is quite unusual. Being from around 10th to 11th century, it predates Christianity in the area. The site is purely a vampire graveyard. This is unique as vampire graves were most often mixed in with other burials, but the closest cemetery was more than 1 kilometer away. From 11 graves, 10 were male and 1 is undecided. They found nothing except for bones and some belt buckles, which goes with the tradition of non-ritual vampire burial. You wouldn't give a person who can rise from the dead a knife now, would you? One person had their mouth open and filled with sand, was laid belly down, and the head was twisted in a strange angle. The other one had their legs completely cut off, most likely so they couldn't walk when they came back, and so on. Drastic measures. But who were these vampires? Were they the same vampires we think of today with sucking blood and turning into bats? Hello, my name is Zairi, and today we are having a look at vampires. Well, Czech, Polish, and a bit of other Slavic vampires. Some cool tidbits of history, folklore, and some fun stories. Let's go! The history. I am really sorry to say to everybody here, but vampires are not real. I know, it's a real bummer. The people in the cemetery were most likely innocent. At least, innocent of vampirism, that is. But folk belief has always been strong, and it could kill. So, what makes a vampire in the eyes of a peasant from around 11 to let's say early 18th century? Vampires in the old days were technically the undead. They rise from their graves to prey on the living people, be it physically hurting them or just mentally. They didn't have to suck blood, they didn't have to turn into bats. If you hurt the living and were walking dead, congrats, you're a vampire. And the most important feature of vampires, when the affected people died and when buried, they didn't decompose in their graves. This led to a panic in Serbia in the 1720s. Around 20 people died in a really short span of time, and when their corpses were dug up, they discovered that the bodies didn't decompose. One lady even looked fatter than she did when she died. From a documentary I watched, they think that this specific case may have been a lung anthrax epidemic, which causes the neck to swell, shortness of breath, and that may have developed into, well, you know, the good old vampire bite into the neck. So this was obviously not good. You had people in the countryside panicking about vampires, and then the same happened in 1755. A small village in Moravia dug up around 30 corpses in mass hysteria. 19 of them were convicts of vampirism, and they were staked, decapitated, and burned. This way of dealing with the undead survived from the pagan times and was still on the rise. This incident enraged Maria Teresa, because this was the beginning of the Enlightenment, and she was determined to fight superstition. She sent her own personal medic Svieten to investigate. He concluded that vampires are not real, of course, and digging up corpses was swiftly banned afterwards. Now, the most likely conclusion to these people not decomposing properly is that, well, there wasn't much research into how a body decomposes underground. Yes, on a battlefield the body decomposes pretty fast, but it wasn't an everyday hobby to go out and dig out corpses. Not only it takes a lot of time, it was also illegal. So, let's say digging up people has been officially banned, so the war against superstition is won on the side of enlightenment, is it not? Not really. You may forbid people to dig up graves and believe, but the stories won't just fade away because a monarch said, "Hey, stop." They know nothing of the countryside life. They know nothing of the monsters lurking in the shadows and in the stories from the time long forgotten. No, vampires survived, and they were thriving. Vampires in folklore. This video was initially sparked by a simple question. Do Slavic vampires turn into butterflies? It is a claim I have read in my internet circle a few times, and I wanted to see where it actually came from. Sad news, it's complicated. So the only mention I found about it was from Wikipedia with a citation to a German book, Donau-Bulgarien und der Balkan by F.Kanitz, sorry for the pronunciation. Now, I don't speak German, but luckily I have friends and the whole book is available online. So I snatched the page that it was quoted from and got it translated. It mentions witches that turn into red-colored butterflies and suck children's blood. So basically you could call them vampires. I mean, they suck blood, and whether they are dead or alive wasn't really mentioned. So in the end, it's really up to anyone to say that Slavic vampires turn into butterflies. The beauty of folk stories is that they are ever-changing, and every person will tell you a tale that is slightly different than the other one. So yeah, maybe it's not fully a vampire thing or confirmed outside of one source, but if you wanna believe it, you're a folk too. So, butterflies aside, in folklore, how do you become a vampire? Turning into any monster is easy if you took your own life. Or you could be a wizard or a werewolf, or when you died and got stepped over by a person, or ran above by an animal, or a bird. It's quite easy. You could also be unlucky enough to be born with teeth already grown out, or if your parents were a witch and a werewolf. There was quite a few ways on how one can become a vampire. If you were ever in the market of romancing a vampire, better not have kids with them because the babies of human and a vampire romance don't have bones. I'm serious. Surprisingly enough, it was never believed that a vampire victim could be turned into a vampire. That came way later. Originally, apart from one butterfly discussion, vampires didn't turn into bats neither. Their preferred animal was usually a wolf. In some sources, vampires can turn into inanimate objects as well, like a pile of hay. Terrifying. Vampires also hated beeswax. There's multiple stories about the monsters chewing on church candles out of pure hatred. And apparently, if you were being fed on by a vampire, you could stop him by moving your toe. Okay. And what about the looks? Some things we know were already there. Pale skin, sharp teeth, slightly pointed ears, but then you had some specifics like hair on hands, weird smell about them, big eyebrows and long nails. Vampires had no shadows and can't see themselves in the mirror. Vampire stories. My favorite are always the stories. They were usually collected by people who went from village to village and asked, "Heard any rumors lately?" Just like in Oblivion, people were always happy to talk, and here are some of them. So, a man in a village is fighting a vampire, as one does. The fight takes them all the way over to the man's cottage. To break free of the vampire and to end the fight, the man grabs a giant dried sausage and smacks the monster in the face. To make sure the vampire would even breathe his way, the man starts eating the sausage mid-fight, and the vampire was like, "Alright, that's it, I have to leave." The next day, the victorious man ate the second half of the sausage and fell ill. There was a fearless soldier who managed to cut a vampire's head straight off. But what he didn't expect was that the vampire took their own head and started to beat the soldier with it. With this, the soldier was terrified and ran away to hide in a cottage. He died there 3 days later. A man hides in a church. In the church, during the night, a vampire gets up, takes off his socks, and walks away to hurt someone somewhere. The man steals one sock. When the vampire returns, he gets really angry and starts chasing the guy around, who is very brave because he sprinkles some holy water on the vampire, which apparently saved his soul. So the vampire thanks him, gets back into his casket with only one sock, and dies peacefully. And last but not least, this is not really a story, but there are apparently vampires who used to go into women's houses, do all of their housework there, have some fun with the women, and then left before dawn. Only turning the dead person over or sprinkling them with holy water could stop this. But honestly, free housework? Hell yeah. And that's about it. I wanted to do something special for Halloween, and even though it's just a small tidbits of a really big theme of vampires, I hope you enjoyed. Like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye. And also check out my coffee shop if you want me to draw something for you. It would be very nice. Okay, bye bye.